everyone, and welcome back to Level Up Watches The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This is the spinoff of the Level Up and Friends podcast, where those of us from the comic book store and video game store Level Up Entertainment in Mays Landing and soon to be Summers Point, New Jersey, get together with some friends and watch the latest in pop culture entertainment. And this is covering the Disney Plus series The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Spoilers. We are going through episode 4. If you have been watching the series, you'll kind of get the gist of it by now. I'm Harry, and I am joined by Kendall once again. Welcome back.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And the only man to try to challenge the Dora Milaje and lose multiple times, Marvelous Mike. Welcome back.
I'm a little upset right now. I thought this was a Frasier podcast, and it turns out that it's not. And I was told there wasn't another Frasier podcast going on, and I think I'm gonna be much more suited for that one.
We'll see if they'll bring that back. That was last week's Level Up and Friends episode that was recorded. Unfortunately, I think all the invitations were sent out, and yours was lost in the mail. So
I'm a little upset.
Maybe they'll bring it back, and become a more regular series. But that's not this show. This is The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, something completely different than Frasier, I think. Although maybe some of the characters in the show could use Frasier or Niles' services. We'll get to that later. Before we do that, Kendall, we have not seen you in a couple weeks. So since that time, a lot has happened. What are your thoughts on, where this show is right now? And you get to meet the glory of Zemo and all the craziness that has happened since then.
Yeah, I mean, episode 3 was really dense. Going to Madripoor was cool. It was cool to see that, kind of realized on the screen. I feel like I have a stack of X-Men comics where they're just like, oh, we're going to Madripoor for whatever reason, whenever they gotta do some shady stuff. So it was really cool to see that. Zemo has been it's been pretty entertaining, but he's real good at reminding you that he's a bad man, as we found towards the end of episode 3. Yeah, and then the way we ended episode 3, that was not expecting that. But
Wakanda forces its way back into the show here. They're back in the MCU. That was really exciting to see.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised.
Before we get into the continuance of that storyline, Marvelous Mike, you have a Marvel Lego or item for us this week?
I do. Yes, I do. Last week, I tried to have my Easter candy of the week because we were running low on Legos. And that went over about as well as you would think. So we do have this. This is it. I got nothing else after. Get plenty of Legos. This is the last Marvel Lego of the week, and it is the Battle of the Avengers Tower that we have here.
Very nice.
We have Iron Man in many different poses. We have Red Skull down here. Black Widow is actually, she's over there, back on
She's
the
getting
ledge.
ready for her solo movie.
And if you see here, we have Thanos's Infinity Stones and his glove, and it sits on my Lego ledge, and it actually, because I needed a little more touch of class to it, I have a Grover acting as King Kong that attacks the tower, and that is actually how it sits on the ledge.
Okay, well, I know Disney owns a lot of franchises. I don't know if that is a crossover that could happen yet.
No, it does not own Sesame Street. It owns the Muppets, but not the Sesame Street Muppets. So this has been your Lego Marvel Lego of the week.
Well, you've got a week to go buy yourself another set and put it together.
That's no problem with me. I got them boxed up in the closet
for episode 5. Let's see it. So I've been.
By the way, I thought I was going to be underdressed tonight, so I just want to thank you, Harry, again, making me feel like the best dressed man in the room.
No problem. I'm representing Rutgers Law this week, so as we may need to have some litigation going on here in this episode. We'll get to that in a little bit. Somebody may need an attorney. I like to throw some Easter eggs in the background of my Zoom box. So I want to show the crowd here. I'll describe it for the audio listeners, but this is Sam Wilson, Captain America, issue 13 of the comic book run. And Sam Wilson is facing off against a very familiar looking foe here. We have John Walker with his shield going up to attack Sam in this issue. So I'm just going to throw that in the background. Just a little Easter egg, maybe something we might see later. We don't know, but that's your comic background for the week.
What are the characters to your right?
Characters?
Yeah.
I've got a couple of Captain Americas back here. They're from the Disney Infinity series.
Oh yes, I have. I could use those next week.
And I've got Sam and Bucky in their Funko Pop forms. So a little bit of background for the video audience. All right, episode 4, The World is Watching. And before we get into it, I was told that Marvelous Mike, you have a little bit of historical perspective for the title of the episode that you wanted to share with the audience.
Yes, I think, but it really goes to the last scene of the show. So I don't know if we should save that.
Okay, all right,
until the end.
We'll come back to it.
I do have a nice very timely historical tie-in.
Okay. So we open the episode with it actually doesn't open at the moment we left off in episode 2. It opens in Wakanda, or should I say, the woods slightly off outside of Wakanda 6 years ago. And we see Bucky and Io, one of the Dora Milaje, and they are trying to deprogram Bucky, and Io is running through the words from the Civil War that Zemo was using to control Bucky to activate his Winter Soldier programming. And Bucky's sitting there, and as she's saying the words, he's getting visibly upset. Great acting on Sebastian Stan's part, I will say, because he doesn't feel like this is going to work. And you see flashbacks from the Winter Soldier and from Civil War, and every time that he was acting as the Winter Soldier, as she's saying each of the words, she finally gets to the last word, and you can see on his face this just sense of relief. And Io just says, "You're free," because it's the first time that those words did not trigger him and switch him into Winter Soldier mode. So it's nice that they gave us the scene, because it kind of shows us that Io and Bucky have a little bit of history here from his time in Wakanda as the White Wolf. Did you guys like this scene? Did you want to see a little bit more from Bucky's time in Wakanda?
I thought it was great. And, I wasn't expecting anything from Wakanda to present itself in this show. And then, of course, it makes perfect sense, that they would be after Zemo, that, Io and Bucky would, have, hung out and, formed a relationship, a bond,
And it was good to see, like you said, Kendall, that relationship, because we had that cliffhanger at the end of episode 3. So seeing where their relationship stems back from sets up how they're going to interact during the rest of this episode.
Yeah, so Io flashes back to present day, and Io is basically running down all of Zemo's crimes. She says, he blew up the UN, he murdered King T'Chaka, and the people who were responsible for him are sort of responsible for Zemo, making sure that Zemo's locked up or dealt with. And Io takes personal responsibility. We talked about last week. She was the guard, the King's Guard that was on duty that day with T'Chaka when the bombing happened. So she's kind of feeling this sense of loss and shame. And Bucky just kind of tells her, look, we still need Zemo. He's a means to an end, which I thought was a great throwback to last week when Zemo told Bucky that he was a means to his end. So a little bit of full circle there. And you see the respect between the two of them, because Bucky's just kind of straight up telling her, like, look, we still need him. I'm not going to give him up. And Io kind of gives him the once over and then says, okay, you've got 8 hours and then we're coming. And I don't know if they didn't have that history that they showed us in Wakanda, I don't know if Io would be that forgiving to give Bucky the time to do whatever he needs to do. But when they said 8 hours, you better believe they mean 8 hours. So it was great. And you know, from there, Bucky just immediately walks into the Zemo stronghold in Ziga, and he just flat out tells them, like, hey, the Dora Milaje are here, and they're coming for you, Zemo. So we gotta get this done. I was really surprised to see Bucky just kind of spill the beans, because we were saying last week, you know, is he setting him up? Did he know that they were nearby? But he just straight up tells Zemo, hey, Dora Milaje are here. What did you guys think about, you know, sort of Bucky's planning, and they start talking about here where they're talking about what Carly's doing, and Sam still believes in her, and Bucky's trying to tell her, and Zemo's trying to tell Sam that, hey, Carly's blown up the GRC building and people are dead. I don't know if there's still anything left there for you to save.
I think Bucky, how he's planning it is very cards on the table. This is, you know, it's business. It's not personal. This is what we have to do. This is how we're going to do it. And it's just, as a matter of like, he's really playing it as he has his ends, his end goal, and he's just going to do whatever he has to do to get there by whatever means. Not to beat it dead, but I think it's no, and it kept popping up throughout the episode too. So it's just, yeah, and it's you know, that's his ends. He's putting it all out there, and I think the arc with Sam and Carly definitely, I mean, tremendous throughout this episode, and I don't think we're done with it.
Yeah, the you know, I definitely, and it makes sense that Sam would be the one who would want to like reach out, you know, especially, you know, finding out how like young she is, and like, you know, like her end goal isn't bad. And he's, you know, as somebody who was, you know, snapped out of existence for 5 years, like he's also, and they kind of go into it in the episode, he's also feeling like the consequences of, you know, coming back to a world that's moved on without him. Meanwhile, she is you know, fighting for the oppressed people who were free from that for 5 years, and then, you know, everything goes back to the way it was. So it makes sense that the two of them would have a connection.
Yeah, and we can talk about, I know we get it a little bit later in the episode, but we can talk about what Carly's motivations are, which we find out a little bit more here. She is part of this group of people that feel like things were better during the blip, during the snap, when half the world's population was gone, because the world changed and the people, you know, borders, they were able to kind of cross borders freely. Everybody's talked about this very generally, so we don't get any kind of, you know, real world examples. They're not saying like, oh, you know, North and South Korea are united again or anything like that. But, you know, they do say that people who would have normally shut others out did allow outsiders in, because they needed those other people to help rebuild, to help carry on the lives. I mean, I imagine, you know, things like farming, food production was probably very difficult if half of the skilled farmers who knew how to do these things were gone, if half the delivery drivers, I mean, how do you keep supply chains up and things like that? So, you know, there were a lot of compromises going on during blip period, and the world had to, by necessity, work together to get through this. And then once everybody came back, it was sort of, okay, we're going to go back to business as usual. Borders go up. There's this GRC, Global Repatriation Committee or Council, but apparently they're very bad with managing supplies, managing people,
and security.
And they keep talking about 6 months. There's this 6 month backlog, 6 month log. And the only reference to 6 months I could find was that was sort of the date that the blip happened according to the show's timeline. So I don't know if they're just saying that the GRC hasn't sent out the supplies that they were supposed to throughout this entire period, or if there's some bigger thing at play here with that 6 months, because we get another reference here where they were supposed to send some teachers to one of the shelters and they hadn't done it in 6 months. And I don't know, what that is, but yeah, we get a little bit more about, why Carly and the Flag Smashers are so passionate about this cause.
And, I think it's also great that they set this up within 6 months or very recently after the Endgame battle, because when you think of it, 5 years, the first 2-3 years, everyone's still adjusting to the new life, learning how to go about it. And then in year 4 and 5, just common sense, you finally adapted to your new surroundings, you've accepted it, you're maybe enjoying, appreciating it, and thinking that fine, you could survive like this. And then to have everything upheaved again on you is, I think anybody would feel what Carly is feeling right now, and her and the Flag Smashers.
Yeah, and it's very jarring and I'm sure traumatic for the people who were blipped back. I mean, to find out that, maybe your old life is no longer as you knew it. Maybe people moved on. I've seen a couple of threads about like what happens to people who had spouses who declared them dead and remarried or started new families. I mean, it had to be really, really hard for the people who lost 5 years of their life and then were blipped back. But like Carly says here, nobody's really giving much thought or much concern for the people who had to stick that 5 year period out and had to survive and figure out how to do it. And now, they're just kind of getting cast aside for these other people who are just magicked back into existence. So it's kind of nice to see both sides of this, because I feel like the MCU and, comics especially are guilty of this, where like a major upheaval event will happen. And then once the event's over, it's like life goes on. The general Marvel universe forgets about it, even though Marvel claims this will change the universe forever. It usually gets swept under the rug, but it's nice to see the MCU.
Same way in the soap operas, same way in my stories.
It's nice to see the MCU continuing these threads and following through with the consequences of Endgame.
Yeah. Especially, after, oh God, what was the name of the second Spider-Man movie?
Far From Home.
Far From Home. It was very convenient that Peter Parker's entire class, everyone he ever knew, was just blipped out for 5 years. And like that movie, that was the first time we saw like a post-blip Marvel universe. Yes. Mm-hmm. But it really didn't feel like anything had changed.
No, it was almost played as like a joke, right? Like they showed the band, shout out to Wagner College, the band getting blipped back into existence, but it was like a funny joke. It wasn't like the trauma of, Aunt May lost her apartment. And I think that was the only real consequence that we saw in that. So yeah, good point. I wanted to bring up Zemo here because once again, he steals every scene that he's in. I think he's fantastic. I hope to see him continue past the series. We'll see. But he lays out for Sam what his motivations are. And basically he's still very much the character, other than finding out that he's obscenely rich, he's still very much the character that he was in Civil War, in that he doesn't believe in superheroes. He doesn't believe in teams like Avengers should exist because they give rise to supremacists and to hero worship and things like that. And the point that he's trying to make to Sam is, the desire to become a super person cannot be separated from supremacy. And I thought that was a great line. Sam tries to bring up like, hey, what about Steve? What about Steve Rogers? And Zemo, to his credit, he kind of like concedes that point. He's like, Steve is, yes, he's an exception, but there's never going to be another Steve Rogers. We can't find another Steve. So I thought that was a really good conversation that Sam and Zemo had, just to kind of get where Zemo's head is in all this. He's a villain, yes, but he's not a villain that wants to rule the world or destroy half the universe. He just doesn't like superheroes. He wants them all to be gone.
Again, I think carrying off of the conversation that we had last week, which again, very timely with everything that's gone on the last year, in terms of statues and in terms of who we idolize, in terms of founding fathers or other presidents or other civic leaders here in the country. What happens when we worship them as heroes without acknowledging their flaws? So it was good to see that underlying discussion continue, especially where we wind up with this.
Right. It's one of the underlying themes of the show, it feels like, is sort of the dangers of hero worship and what that could lead to. Sam comes up with the idea of asking around about Danya Madane, which is the flag smasher who passed away, maybe she wasn't part of the Flag Smashers, but she was at least an important person to Carly in the last episode. And he said, if she's a community leader, then there's probably going to be a funeral. My TT, we had a funeral for her for like a week. The community mourned for her, and we had a great moment where I think Zemo was like, what is a TT? What is a TT? And Sam's like, it's my aunt, my auntie. I knew what he meant by TT, but I know Zemo had, we had to spell it out for the audience. But
I like how there was no other, funeral that they could have compared it to. That there was no other, like, we've never had a funeral before, and this is the only one that we could compare it to in our history.
Well, I mean, all the other funerals are somewhat private that we've seen. The
that's
Tony
true.
Stark's
Yes,
funeral, Black Widow barely got a funeral. They were all pretty quiet. So this leads to Zemo, Sam, and Bucky going to the GRC, sort of shelter for the refugees. And Sam and Bucky, their plan is to just walk around and basically yell, Danya Madane, does anybody know where the funeral of Danya is? And it's like, what kind of plan is that? Meanwhile, Zemo basically brings a stash full of Turkish Delight and just starts handing them out to some kids. And clearly
all he needed was a black van to be doing that out of.
Clearly these kids have never learned stranger danger before. But he starts singing Baba Black Sheep and just talking to these kids and whipping out Turkish Delight. And if anybody has ever read the works of T.S. Eliot and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, they would know that if someone's offering Turkish Delight to children, bad things will only come of that. But basically,
just to be your ombudsman here, that's C.S. Lewis. I don't want you to get any letter.
Yes. C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis. Very different.
Thank you. So he hands the Turkish Delight to a little girl, and he's like, do you know about the funeral? And of course, the little girl knows all the details about the funeral. And then, interestingly enough, he points over his shoulder to Sam and Bucky, and he's like, see those men? They're very bad. Don't trust them. And he walks back over to Sam and Bucky, and he's like, well, this was useless. I lost all my Turkish Delight. He plays very coy, like he doesn't know what he is doing.
And just at that point, at least Kristen and I thought that, oh God, here we go again. They're going to be duped and taken advantage of, and the bad guy is going to get away. Not seeing, ultimately what happens, but it was just like, oh, you got to be kidding me.
Yep.
We're getting into another mess here.
But that was a very great scene for Zemo.
Oh, yeah.
He's just like very menacing, but also like
because you're like, what is he going to do with these kids? Like, what's happening here? This is a man.
I think he really is approaching low-key status in my mind with this series.
I feel the same way, and that's why I hope that, like Loki, he gets a chance to continue after the series, finishes up. But Zemo kind of flips the convention on its head and comes clean and tells Sam and Bucky that the funeral is going to be today. But when they're asking him what time the funeral is going to be, he's like, "Oh no. I know how this works. I am not going to tell you the time, because as soon as I do that, I'm no longer useful to you and you're going to turn me in or whatever. So I have the leverage." And, Bucky
I thought that was brilliant. I really did.
Yeah. Bucky gets pissed off, starts smashing things. And, Zemo very calmly offers him some, I think, cherry blossom tea, which I'm like, this is great. And Sam kind of calls him out. He's like, don't let him get to you, Bucky. He's just going to do that head tilt thing. And, he very very subtly like restrains his head, because that's exactly what he was doing. But without any other leads, Sam decides to turn to Sharon Carter. He calls Sharon because apparently,
I mean, the power broker.
There's got to be a reason they brought her back in this show. I mean, it's a really weird call, because you would think Sam has a lot of other people on speed dial, given his history with the Avengers.
Actually, so Kendall was not here last week, and my prediction was that they set her up to be the power broker. Did you get that feeling at all in the episode? Do you have that feeling?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like, she's like tracking, Carly, and
and she insists to Sam. She tells him on this phone call, she's like, "Oh, we've got to find Carly. I've got a satellite in the area. Do whatever you can to find Carly." And it's like, well, that's exactly what the power broker is doing. He's trying to find Carly so he can get the vials of serum back.
Yeah, and I mean, there has to be a reason we haven't seen the power broker's face. On the other hand, I'm hoping it's not and that's just the comic book reader in me. I know MCU and Marvel Comics Sharon Carter are very different characters. Mm-hmm. But it's just like, oh, there goes another hero, quote unquote. But it makes a lot of sense now that you say it.
When I just want your friends at Level Up to make a post to me when that's revealed to be true, that they heard it here first.
All right.
Magnificent Monty, we will be sure to credit. So Sharon also gives us the update on Madripoor. She says that things are about to go real south, because the power broker who runs all of Madripoor is very, very angry about these missing vials and the fact that Nagel is now dead. They've killed the Golden Goose. So Sharon really plugged into the status of the power broker and Madripoor and everything else. And the show, making sure that we remember that Sharon Carter is still out there and still involved in this in some way. After this scene, there's a scene between Carly and one of the Flag Smashers. And I don't think we ever get a name for this person, so I'm just going to call him the Captain America fan. And they have this conversation. They go to the grave site of the Captain America fan's grandfather, and we find out that the grandfather fought in World War II. And they kind of, the guy talks to Carly about how he was such a big Cap fan, and back then the world was black and white, and now it's in shades of gray. And he feels that the best Captain America replacement would be Carly, because at this point Carly is questioning whether or not they're doing this the right way, if they should be creating more super soldiers, distributing the vials out and about and around. And Cap fan is like telling her, yes, like, I think that, you're the one standing up for the people that no one's standing up for. And what else, does Captain America do? And he also says something about how like this movement that they're starting is going to outlive the legacy of that shield, which I thought was an interesting line here, given what, we see later in the episode. But this speech emboldens Carly, and she collects all the vials, and she's like, yep, this is what we need to do. Are you guys starting to feel any sort of sympathy for Carly's character or the Flag Smashers or, you know, any sort of thing. It just feels like the show is trying to make them out, not so much to be just out and out villains, but they also blew up a GRC building in the last episode and killed some people, which we find out is like the father of two. So like now these kids are going to grow up without a father, and, you know, there were innocent people inside. So how do you feel about the Flag Smashers at this point?
I mean, probably since like episode 2, I feel like they've been kind of like painting them as a little more like sympathetic than a typical Marvel villain would be. Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, like, I'm kind of pro Flag Smasher. Granted, like, you know, they did, you know, blow up a building and kill some innocent people. Yeah,
It's tough, right?
It is tough. Like,
I think this week they did a very good job of humanizing Carly, making her sympathetic. And really by the end of the episode, you think that she's more lost and confused than rather than a villain.
Right. I mean, she's been thrust in sort of this leadership role at a young age, and you know, you can kind of see that even that is weighing very heavily on her, and that's another theme that we see throughout this episode is people who are in leadership positions dealing with the pressure of being in those positions. Because, speak of the devil, in walks John Walker and his partner Lamar Hoskins, and they bust into Zemo's stronghold in Ziga. And, you know, basically they're like, look, the party's over. You know, Zemo, you got to turn him in. And Sam and Bucky try to explain, like, look, no, he's been very helpful. He's provided us with some leads. We're going to go. And Sam just lays out the entire plan for John Walker. He's like, I'm going to go find Carly at the funeral. I'm going to talk to her. It's going to be great. I used to do counseling with vets, which I'm really glad they brought that up again. That was something that we saw in Captain America, the Winter Soldier. And it's part of Sam's backstory that he has this experience with counseling. But John Walker throws it back in his face and he's like, yeah, I know the people you counseled, you know, and made it sound like Sam didn't do that great of a job, or there's still some issues there. I don't know. They don't get into it much further than that. But basically, Walker and Hoskins come with Sam and Bucky to the shelter, and they're fighting them the entire way, you know, don't agree with the plan. Walker's getting more and more agitated that, you know, they have to be kind of patient with this. But I noticed Hoskins is the one that kind of calms him down. He's like, look, John, just like, let's see where they're going with this. You know, we'll figure this out. And Zemo's right here. You know, we can take him back later. So it's Hoskins, the partner of Walker, who kind of like calms the room down, which I thought was well played.
And I said to Kristen at this point, I said, I like this Hoskins. I hope he sticks around for a long time. I want to see where they go with him.
Battlestar. They tell Sam, Walker tells Sam basically, like, once they get to the shelter, they're like, all right, you get 10 minutes. You get 10 minutes to do it your way, and then I'm going to do it my way. And, you know, even ask Bucky, he's like, you're going to send your partner in there with no backup, with super soldiers. And, you know, to this point, Bucky and Sam have almost been at odds. I mean, they were ready to fight each other, like in episode 2. And now Bucky's kind of like, well, he's not really my partner, but like, now that you've said that, you know, how dare you? He's kind of like defending Sam, and he's like, this is Sam's plan. Sam knows what he's doing. Let's go with it. So, you know, we see the funeral. There's a group of the people in the shelter over the body of Donya. Carly's delivering the eulogy. It's beautiful, one world, one people, all about, you know, how the Donya brought everybody together. And she sees Sam in the balcony, and you know, to Sam's credit, he lets her finish. He hears her out before he even steps foot into the room. While this is all going on, they keep intercutting John Walker, and he's just like, he looks like a little kid when you tell the kid like, oh, you know, you can have ice cream in like 5 minutes, because like he's like he can't sit still. He's
And I know, did
breathing
you
really
mention
heavily.
that he handcuffed Zemo to the
Yes. He handcuffs Zemo to the boiler, I guess that's there. But he's like holding his head like he's got a headache. Like he can't sit still for some reason, and he keep like showing his just very twitchy and jittery through this. As the other mourners file out, we get this great conversation between Sam and Carly, where Sam is basically, like we talked about before, Sam's kind of saying to her, you know, look, I understand where you're coming from, but you're killing people. And, you know, I understand your fight, but I can't agree with the way that you're fighting your fight. And, you know, one of the things that he says to her that opens her eyes a little bit, he throws Zemo's words about supremacy to Carly, and he says, you know, a friend of mine says that you're being a supremacist, you're, you know, handing out this serum and you're hurting people. And Carly, like at one point, kind of admits that, like, oh, you know, I've got to go fight them if they're in my way. And then she's like, wait, I didn't mean it to sound like that. And Sam is kind of getting her to realize what her actions are looking like, and that she's turning into the person that she's trying to stop, and that people are getting hurt along the way. But John Walker, who I
called this the Chris Pratt moment of the episode.
John Walker, who we see, he has a little tussle with Bucky out in the hallway because he's getting impatient, and Bucky sort of stands in his way, and Walker looks at him and he's like, oh, this must be so easy for you. You've got that super soldier serum running through your veins, you know, and we get this kind of hint of jealousy to Bucky and his power. Walker does, but just as Sam is getting through to Carly, they're sitting down, like things seem calm. Walker busts in. He's like, you know, I'm John Walker. You're under arrest, you know, starting to throw out demands and threats. And the whole thing just goes pear-shaped. I mean, Carly starts running. Zemo's escaped the handcuffs. They show that the handcuffs are empty. Chaos, Flag Smasher start running in. You know, there's fighting everywhere. People are fighting each other. It's like a maze. They're trying to catch Carly, chase her, and you know, the whole thing ends up reaching a crescendo when Carly runs into a hallway, and all of a sudden there's Zemo at the other end, and he's just straight shooting her, like trying to shoot her, and he hits her in a couple spots, and she falls over a table, which also had the vials in like a fanny pack sitting on top of it. The vials fall out onto the ground. They start rolling everywhere. Zemo walks up to him, looks at one, picks it up, and there's this moment where you're like, is he about to drink the super soldier serum and become one? I mean, they wait for like a beat, and then he smashes it on the ground. He starts stomping on the ones that are on the ground, the vials, and you know, basically he's trying to destroy the serum like he's talked about before he catches Captain America's shield to the face and falls over, and it's John Walker. And you know, there's no one else. As soon as Carly sees Walker, she starts running. You know, she's bleeding out, and Walker is now standing above Zemo with the shattered vials on the ground, and he finds one just sitting in a corner that has not been smashed, picks it up, looks at it, and you're like, oh no, of all the people, this is the guy that we don't want to have this vial. I'd rather have Zemo have the dang vial than this guy right now. And he picks it up, looks at it, and he slips it in his pocket. Did you guys have any thoughts about Walker obtaining the serum, Zemo smashing the serum, other than the Chris Pratt of it all?
Well, I mean, in the terms that we almost got, you know, resolution, and then but no, I think it and I'm sorry, Kendall, for jumping in, but I think it gave Zemo a lot of respect for his character, and for him, that he was true to his word. He was not trying to hoodwink, you know, our heroes at all during the series. He says, I want to destroy it. And there was that moment of hesitation where we're like, oh no, is he gonna pull one over on them? But he was true to his word, and he gained our respect by that. Walker, on the other hand, we were screaming at the television.
No, yeah, for sure. Like you said, Zemo, because yeah, I think, and that was just like, yeah, great direction, great writing. Because yeah, like that's your first thought, like Baron Zemo, a bad guy. Oh, he's gonna drink it, and they're gonna have to have a punching match.
Yeah.
But just like, yeah, him like going through, like basically throwing that power away, standing true to himself, makes him so much. I mean, like, he's not a likable dude. He's a bad dude. But I do like, I mean, like, yeah.
I appreciate that he laid out his ideals and he stuck to those ideals. I mean, he said, like, this is how I operate, this is what I feel, and that's what he's doing. I mean, he could have, even if he didn't want to take the serum himself, he could have pocketed it, sold it on the black market or something like that. But he doesn't want more super soldiers in the world. He wants to destroy them all.
Yeah, and just like how lame is he after that? It's just like him smashing that, like he just feels more dangerous.
So, question for you guys: do you think that between his smashing and Walker picking up that one vial, did they get all 20?
Didn't look to be 20.
Do you guys think that there might be some other ones either down in that basement or floating around somewhere else?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. But I feel like this is like turning out to be like a really great story, and I'd rather them not tap this well again.
Well, in the Marvel universe, how many pseudo super soldiers are running around, in the comics?
Yeah, exactly.
just looking for potential threads that may be pulled later on, if need be. Carly and Captain America Fan kind of assess the situation after this when they get a moment to escape and cool down, and they confirm, the vials have been destroyed. And Carly's just saying like, what were the chances that we'd all be assigned to the same quarters, that we'd all have a chance to meet? We would normally probably hate each other or be at odds because they've done a good job of showing the flag smashers as people of different nationalities, different backgrounds, different ages, different genders, and just trying to show that this is really, a whole bunch of people thrown together, and they're all working together. The power broker texts her friend, I guess, the other guy from the episode last, who also doesn't have a name. And it's, the basic threats: I will kill you, I want the power back, I want the serum back, and all that. And her friends are telling her like, look, we can't fight this war on multiple fronts. We've got Sam and Bucky on one end, and New Cap after us, and we've got the power broker after us, and what are we going to do? And Carly, to her credit, she kind of takes all the information in, and she says, look, I've got a plan, but first we're going to kill the new Captain America, and we're going to separate Bucky and Sam from them, and kill them too if we have to. But it seems like she still believes in Sam. So we'll see what happens there. This is not where, we'll catch up with her a little bit later. Before we get to that, there's this scene in the Zemo compound when Zemo he's got like the cold compress on his head to try to like recover from taking the shield to the face. He asks Sam, would you have taken the serum? Have you ever been offered the serum? And Sam says no. And then he says, would you have taken it if you had been offered? And right away, Sam says no. And Zemo is impressed. He says, that was without any kind of hesitation, that you would just turn down that kind of power. That's very impressive. But again, Zemo's trying to get into Sam's head here too a little bit, and he tells him, Carly is gone. There's nothing there. Super soldiers can't be allowed to exist. We've got to get rid of them. And Sam throws back at Zemo a question that we had last week, which was, well, what about Bucky? I mean, Bucky is technically a super soldier. You're working with him. are you going to kill him? I mean, is that part of your mission? Is that part of your plan? Before Zemo can answer, our good friend John Walker comes busting in again and orders them basically to hand Zemo over. He says, look, enough is enough. It's time. Sam turns him down, says, look, he's been more helpful than you've been, which is true. And this is where New Cap, feeling like he's pretty cocky, arrogant, he's like, okay, you want to do this? Should I put the shield down? Will that make it easier? And I was like, oh, he's looking for a fight now. And before we get the fight, in bust, with the vibranium spears, the Dora Milaje, and it's time's up. The 8 hours have expired. True to their word, they're here to collect Zemo, and just this crazy fight breaks out because John Walker, thinking that he'll be, I'm Captain America. He's like introducing himself to the Dora Milaje. Don't you know who I am? Sort of like that, and they say, no, look, we're taking Zemo. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And he goes, well, you don't have jurisdiction here, which is, it's kind of funny for him to say because he's operating in like a foreign country and his jurisdiction is pretty questionable. Loved the response from the Dora Milaje. The Dora Milaje have jurisdiction wherever the Dora Milaje happen to be, which I was like, I need to remember that for the next time I have a civil procedure issue, some jurisdiction question.
That will not cure a personal jurisdiction defect, though, I can assure you.
For you lawyers in the audience, there's a jurisdiction joke for you. New Cap makes one mistake, and it's a pretty bad one. But he's like, I think we got off to the wrong foot. And he puts his hand up, and the second he raised his hand, I was like, oh, this is gonna be good, because he tries to put it on Ayo's shoulder, and he barely even he doesn't even get to touch her, and she instantly wham knocks him into the spears in the back. He falls to the ground, and this massive fight breaks out, and it was great. I mean, this was like, get your popcorn ready, watch the Dora Milaje go to work, because I mean, it was beautiful. They are surgical, precise in their movements. They took down Hoskins in the background. They took down New Cap without any issue. Sam looks to Bucky and he's like, should we jump in here? And Zemo's in the back corner sipping whiskey or cherry blossom tea. And it's just great. Like this was a great moment. And Bucky with his arms crossed is just like, yeah, you're looking strong, John. It's like, yes. But eventually they do decide to jump into this fight, and it doesn't go very well for them either. I mean, the Dora Milaje take down Sam, take down Bucky. Ayo, in this crazy moment, just walks up to Bucky, and she's just like, and his arm just falls off, his vibranium arm, which was given to him by Wakanda, falls off to the ground. Bucky looks shocked, hurt, betrayed maybe. And in all of this chaos, though, Zemo just kind of quietly walks over to a side room, closes a door, and he's gone. He escapes, pulls an El Chapo, as Sam will later say, because we see an open sewer grate or something with a bathtub pushed aside. So Zemo's gone. In the battle, the Dora Milaje also end up with new Captain America's shield, one of the Dora Milaje, and I was like, oh, are they going to take the shield? Are they going to take it? Because she's standing there with the shield. And once they see that Zemo's escaped, they're basically done with the situation. So Ayo tells her, drop the shield. And I was like, oh, darn it. No, don't give it back. And they leave. But we get this great moment where John Walker's sort of picking up his teeth and stuff off the floor. And he's just like, they weren't even super soldiers. And they defeated him. So how did you guys feel about this crazy Dora Milaje battle?
I thought it was pretty sweet. Love seeing John get his butt kicked, But Yeah, I mean, it's that thing. Marvel loves it, you know. Get all the people who should be on the same side together and have them beat the crud out of each other. But I liked it. I liked it a lot.
And I hope we revisit the Bucky arm situation again, that he could have that conversation with Io, because it seems to be it was a failsafe put in by the Wakandans, that we're going to help him, but we have to make sure that we are still in control of him at the end of the day. And that seemed, as you know, was a surprise for everybody, including Bucky, that was there like that. So I think that was very clever for them to do, and to be brought out in this scenario at this point in time.
Yeah, and I was surprised that because we were saying that there's a lot of different groups that this show is trying to balance towards the end of the last episode. So I was kind of surprised that they're in, they're out, this is it. But it makes total sense for the way that the Dora Milaje would operate, and it would also make sense if this is the end of their presence in the show and the end of Zemo's presence in the show as well. I mean, it feels like they kind of got everything that they needed to out of him, and if his character could just be lost in the wind until Marvel decides to pick him back up again, that would be fine with me.
Like Loki picking up the Tesseract.
Yes. So maybe, is this the end of Zemo? Is this the last time we'll see the Dora Milaje? For now, we'll see. But if it is, I'm completely fine with this being the conclusion, because I think it was a great push that this episode needed.
Yeah, I think if the Dora Milaje will be after Zemo, so I feel like if we bring Zemo back, we'll have to bring them back. And with only 2 episodes left, I could see them both, they go back to their little corners until the next project.
So we get the sort of licking their wounds scene next between Walker and Hoskins, and they're sitting like at this outdoor plaza or something, and Walker asks Hoskins, like, if you had the chance to take the serum, would you do it? And it's sort of a mirror of the scene between Zemo and Sam, because here Hoskins is like, hell yeah, I'd take it. No hesitation, but he's definitely sure to take it. And they get into a little bit more of like the history between them. Apparently, we remember John had those 3 medals of honor, and crazy stats, but apparently like there was some murkiness going on, and they were involved in Afghanistan, which I wrote down because that was sort of tied back into Tony Stark's backstory in the first Iron Man, where he suffered the wound. So I don't know if that's going to come into play anywhere, but I wrote it down. But basically, the day that they got those 3 medals of honor was the worst day of John Walker's life, and they must have lost some people, and some things went down that maybe the government doesn't know about, or they don't want to talk about, because it sounded like from this conversation that maybe what they did was not as honorable as has been advertised. And Hoskins asks Walker, if we had the serum that day, just think of how many lives we could have saved. And it's like, oh no, like you just keep, nudging him in that direction. And, I think Walker ends this conversation by saying, I just want to do something right. And if being Captain America is the thing that I get right, like I want that to be my thing. And it's like, oh, you see him kind of like at the diving board edge, ready to jump in to do whatever it takes. Did this conversation change your opinions of Walker or Hoskins, or no? Okay. All right. No.
Move along.
Okay. All right. The next scene we see is Carly decides that she's going to try to threaten Sam's family. She calls Sarah, Sam's sister, on the phone, and she basically says like, hey, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to kill your brother if he's working for the new Captain America. And Sarah basically tells her like, no, there's no way Sam's working for that man. And she has a great line here where she says basically like America doesn't care about me and my history, so why should I care about its mascots? Which is like, wow, like that's pretty bold, and pretty in line with what we've seen, in the first couple of episodes, where the show is kind of drifted away a little bit, I feel like, from some of the social commentary that it was making in those first couple of episodes. This line just kind of brought it back home again, where it's true, like, that this Captain America figure, the icon that they're trying to make him out to be, doesn't necessarily represent all of America. And Carly's kind of surprised to hear that, because she expects everybody to be like, red, white, and blue. Yeah, let's go. And yeah, I think that's pretty representative of the country as a whole right now. But Carly makes the next step. She goes that one step further and decides to say, all right, well, I want to see Sam. Tell him to come alone, or else I'm going to come and visit you on the dock. Oh, and your son and your other son. And like, just tries to like threaten Sarah. And it's just like, oh, we were rooting for you, Carly. Now you're trying to make threats to little kids and Sam's family, and not that great. So naturally, Sarah tells Sam then tells Bucky, and then Sam decides he's going to go meet Carly. And even though she said come alone, he's going to bring Bucky too. So, doesn't listen to any of the instructions, and decides that he's going to go over there and meet up with Carly. So we get another conversation between Sam and Carly when they go over. She sees that Bucky's there with him, and she sees that he didn't come alone, but she basically says like, look, I didn't mean to threaten your family. I wasn't going to hurt them. I just wanted to get your attention. I thought that you were, a tool of the regime, but now I see that you're not hiding behind a shield. You are somebody different, that you say you are. And she offers Sam to join her, or just stand back and let her do her thing. Like that's what her final, kind of ultimatum to Sam is. And that conversation again gets interrupted because Sharon chimes in to Sam and is like, I'm tracking new Cap, and he's almost at your position, which I thought this was interesting because Sharon's instructions were not to track new Cap. Her instructions were to watch the camp, for Carly and the Flag Smashers and stuff. So, the fact that she has like this tracking on John Walker, interesting, something to kind of jot down as we follow how Sharon Carter is going to play into all this. And once again, John Walker shows up and all hell breaks loose. I mean, this is where we get this huge battle between Walker, the Flag Smashers, Sam and Bucky. They end up kind of getting separated, where Bucky's fighting, on his own, and Sam and New Cap are together and fighting together, which I thought, for a minute there, it looked like they were kind of, working together as a team and doing well together. New Cap is he gets separated from Hoskins. Hoskins ends up getting taken captive and bound with zip ties and stuff. And Walker is like frantically looking around for him. He gets in a fight with a Flag Smasher, and in the process, he throws his shield and it gets embedded into a wall, like a concrete wall. And it's at that point that you're like, whoa, did he do what we think he did? Because that's not something you would normally, be able to do. And he gets into a fight with a Flag Smasher on the stairs, and the Flag Smasher is holding like an iron rod or something. And Sam is in the hallway too. And he sees basically New Cap like kick the Flag Smasher into a wall, take the iron rod and like bend it with his hands, and Sam just looks at him. He's like, what did you do? Because now Sam is also starting to put the pieces together. Throughout this fight, it was really neat to see the different ways that Sam was using his abilities, knowing that he's up against super soldiers. I really liked seeing he was using the jetpack. I noticed more to like put some oomph into his punches, which I thought was really, really cool. Before we get to sort of the conclusion of the fight, was there anything that you guys wanted to talk about, about this fight or the lead up to it?
Not really.
Standard Marvel action.
Yeah,
I think so. And then, but that reveal, like you said, when he bends the iron, pipe. That was the best part, I think, of
Yeah.
the fight sequence.
Yeah.
Did either of you think there was a chance he was not going to take the serum?
I think, well, it's hard because I have some of the comic history too that I'm thinking about while I'm watching this. So I thought that the serum was going to be inevitable. Part of me was wondering if he had already taken the serum before this episode even started, like if they had experimented with him before, and because he showed an ability to use the shield and everything very fast, and they talked about how his body was so enhanced and all this stuff. So part of me was wondering if he had already taken some form of it before this. But yeah, I mean, either it was going to be here in this moment, or it was going to come into play, in one of the next two episodes. But I thought that the serum was an inevitability.
Same, either we were going to see that he had already taken it, or see him having a discussion with one of the characters and then taking it following that discussion. So it was not a big surprise for us.
Yep. So we end up in a situation where, all four of our principal heroes are all in a room with the Flag Smashers, and you have Hoskins has, he got himself out of his binds, and the Captain America fan who was talking to Carly before about, how much he respected Captain America and everything else. He's got John Walker in sort of like a body lock, holding him back. And Carly advances on him with a knife and is about to go to stab him. And Hoskins comes out of nowhere and tackles her out of the way, pushes her aside. In response to that, she punches Hoskins and he flies clear across the room into a concrete pillar. And you see his neck just sort of go limp, and he goes limp. And he's like a trickle of blood out of his mouth, and it doesn't look good. He's not moving. And so at that point, Carly and the Captain America fan, they take off running. And Walker runs up to Hoskins, and he's trying to, touch his face and check for vital signs. And it pretty clear, it looks like Hoskins is dead. Although I do see there's a little bit of debate about that online. People are wondering if,
Really?
He may not be really dead, or if he's not really dead, it may make what happened next even worse. But to John Walker, Hoskins looks dead. And in response, Bucky and Sam start running after the Flag Smashers, and we see John Walker, look at a window, and he's got his shield in his hand, and he just runs, books it for the window, jumps through the window, and lands on a car. And I'm like, you know what? That's probably the most Steve Rogers thing that he's done this entire show, because
Yeah,
I swear we saw Steve do that like in Avengers or one of the other movies at least 2 or 3 times. He lands on the car, and he's down on the ground floor outside, and you see he catches sight of new Captain America fan.
May I pause now and give
Yes.
the historical context?
Yes.
For what's about to happen. So episode starts, and then the title pops up on the screen. The whole world is watching, and my mind goes to one place, and that's 1968, Chicago, the Democratic National Convention. And it is when the student protesters protesting the Vietnam War and fighting for civil rights gather in Grant Park, because that's where the Mayor Daley did not want them around the convention center. And they get into, on the one of the last days of the convention, into the fight with the police. And the police are beating these protesters, and the television cameras are rolling, and they are doing a cut from the convention, all the news, to the police beating these protesters, and the protesters start chanting, "The whole world is watching. The whole world is watching." And this is the first time, because of the power of television, that America sees its law enforcement, sees its government as potentially not the heroes that we thought that they were up until this point in time. So that is playing in my head the entire episode until this moment.
Mm-hmm. And also, it's been used as a rallying cry for a lot of the protests that we've seen over the last more recent years too. with a lot of the different different incidents that have happened recently. So this cry keeps coming back. The whole world is watching. The whole world is watching, and it's something that a lot of people have top of mind. In that same context. John Walker sees the guy who was holding him back, who was our Captain America fan from earlier in the episode, and he corners him against a statue. He knocks him over, and he's down on the ground. And Captain America, New Cap, walks up to him with the shield, and the guy, he puts his hands up and he basically says, it wasn't me. And we see John Walker just raise the shield up over his head. And for a second, like, there's a pause. And that's where I'm like, wait a minute, is Disney going here? Like, what's about to happen? Very reminiscent of Civil War, when you had Steve Rogers, when he had Tony Stark down on the ground. He also had raised the same shield. Well, I guess same shield, different timeline, over his head. But in this case, John Walker brings it down and smashes into this man on the ground. And then he doesn't just do it once, he does it a second time and a third time. And each time, they show the crowd with their cell phones out, all pointed towards Walker recording this. And, you see the blood dripping down the man's arm as he's down on the ground. He's silent and he's not moving. And Walker just bashing him with the shield over and over again. And Sam and Bucky arrive, a little bit too late. They get there and they see from the crowd, what has happened as Cap. He stands up and he starts looking around, and he just looks so like an animal at this point. I mean, he's breathing heavy, and he's just, his eyes are darting around the whole crowd. And you see Carly, and she's looking on in horror from the crowd. And all of a sudden the camera pans out, and it's John Walker standing there with the shield, and there's blood splattered on the bottom corner of the shield. And then it cuts to the credits, and it's like this really like solemn music as that's the last image that you see. And it's a very haunting image of this man, decked out in the red, white, and blue, the Captain America colors, and he's holding the shield, and it's just it's covered in this man's blood. And there's a lot of people asking, did he decapitate the guy? I mean, it's kind of, vague. I think they're trying not to get, too high of a rating, for the gore. But it's a dark moment. And I think it's one of the darkest ones that we've seen in the MCU in some time, especially given the context, given the symbolism. This is going to be interesting to see how they wrap this up. There's 2 episodes left. I'm going to turn it over to you guys. I'll start with Kendall. What are your thoughts, at the end of this, as that scene just goes right to credits and you see Captain America with the shield?
I mean, I imagine this is going to maybe piss some people off that Marvel and Disney decided to go here. But yeah, it's a very, very powerful image, and it's like a, this tale is, in some ways as much about John Walker as it is, Sam and Bucky. And I think it's like a good, so getting a little like real.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think there are people in the world who like don't understand like how like law enforcement, like how that like, how that like gives people complexes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this series has been doing a good job of like showing that through John Walker. Cause like when we first like see him without his mask in episode 2, you know, he's like, it's like, oh, he's like, he's got like the jitters. He's like,
yeah, he's
and
nervous.
then like we see him like he starts there, and then he like is getting like cocky and arrogant, and then he's getting like angry, like, why aren't people respecting me? And you know, it's all building up to this. So yeah, I thought it was pretty wild, but I'm stoked to see where it goes.
Yeah. All right, Marvelous Mike, what do you think about new Captain America standing there with the bloody shield?
I think it was an allegory. I think this whole series has been an allegory for America, and just, you know, going back to what I said, you're comparing it to 1968. Now seeing it, the entire world is going to see the emblem of America in a way that it has never seen before, and the ramifications of that outside of just for John Walker, but as a country as a whole. And maybe, you know, some soul searching as to what they need to focus on and what a hero should be in America. So I think that story continues to be a parallel. And I think, you know, 2 episodes to go, there's a lot to catch up. And I wonder if we'll get a little longer maybe in the penultimate and final episode, or are they going to leave it where they're going to do another season?
Yeah, and no end credit sequences yet either.
No.
Like no mid credit, no end credits. I saw it put this way, and I thought this was really, really poignant. Steve Rogers is what America imagines itself to be, and John Walker is how the world sees America as it really is. You know, violent, impatient, vengeful. I just thought that was a really good kind of way to put it. And I did a little bit of research for this episode just to see sort of what the reaction was. And I would say surprisingly, but I can't unfortunately say surprisingly, there are a lot of people that are arguing that John Walker did nothing wrong. And that, you know, it's not as shocking as it should be, but they're basically making the point that, you know, he was trying to stop this known terrorist who did kill, you know, as part of an organization that killed innocent civilians. And there was an ongoing threat to this general public, and that the man himself being a super soldier is a threat. And so John Walker was doing what he felt was necessary to eliminate the threat. And, you know, that line of thinking kicked off a whole mess of discourse, you know, through the internet. And you know, these are conversations that I think we as a country are having as a whole in terms of, like what you were saying, Kendall, you know, what law enforcement's role is in trying to keep the peace, you know, and the abuse of power that we've seen in many instances, especially of late. So, you know, to see a defense of John Walker, I do wonder if this show is going to try to go down that road, because, you know, there's 2 episodes left, and, you know, whether or not there's going to be consequences for this action. They clearly showed that Walker was being recorded, and this was being broadcast to the world. Whether or not there are going to be actual consequences in the show, maybe, you know, at the end, but at first, is an interesting question that I have, or whether they're going to try to present this defense of Walker to try to maybe not rehabilitate the character, but, you know, at least justify the action at this point.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I would like to think they will follow through, and we'll get, you know, some kind of closure on the subject. Because, you know, it's not like they were even fighting, you know, they were fighting earlier, but this was an outright execution, you know, like, and that was recorded by all those people. So
yeah,
I'm sure we'll see some fallout from it. But yeah, there's only 2 episodes to go.
It's only 2 episodes left. And, you know, some of the other arguments were that, you know, the Avengers have killed people. Sam Wilson, we pointed it out in episode 1. He was throwing people out of helicopters and blowing them up. So, you know, killing has not been off the table for our heroes before. But I think, like you said, Kendall, it's kind of the way that this happened. You know, the man was on the ground and, you know, for all intents and purposes, he was incapacitated. And it was the second hit and the third hit, and, you know, the just going on much longer than it needed to make a message. You know, it felt very much like this was revenge for the killing of Hoskins, and maybe Walker's way to show the world that now that I had the serum, I'm to be taken seriously.
Was that quote that you sent me the other day, was that the from the first Captain America movie?
Yeah. So I sent Mike a quote from Dr. Erskine from Stanley Tucci's character from Captain America: The First Avenger. And there's a great scene between him and Steve Rogers pre-serum where he tells Steve, you know, the serum, it amplifies, you know, what you have inside of you already. That's all that it does. So if you are already a good man, you'll become a great man. But if you were already wicked or something, or evil, it will make you, you know, horrible, supremely horrible. And that concept comes up again. It comes up in the dialogue between Hoskins and Walker, where Hoskins is like, oh yeah, I think it just amplifies what's already in you.
And you saw the quote, I'm sorry, just said good becomes great, bad becomes worse.
There we go. Thank you. And, you know, it's funny because there was a subplot in the first Avenger, which would be great to go back and watch, you know, after watching this, where the U.S. Army has a candidate in mind for the serum, who is like the guy who is, he's passing every test. He's like the best. He's the strongest. And Erskine tells him, no, I don't want the best soldier. I want a good man, you know, to do this. So, you know, here, we're getting to see what that world would have been like if they picked the best soldier to be Captain America, and, you know, the qualities that are being amplified here. But, you know, again, I say this because I know that there's going to be viewers that are very frustrated, I think, coming up. But I just, given the way that the current temperature of the world, sometimes there are defenses that are made for some of these types of actions. And, you know, the American government is not one to admit that it makes mistakes. So I could definitely see there being some sort of an attempt at justification, maybe not in the proposed narrative of the show, but at least, you know, through, you know, and proven wrong maybe later. But I could see them definitely trying to rehabilitate the character. After all, after episode 2, like I told you guys before, they ended up selling John Walker Captain America t-shirts and keychains and lunchboxes. And
well, don't you all feel foolish now?
I hope 2 weeks is a quick enough time to return all those items. I don't know, but yeah, whether or not, you know, we'll see that, I guess stands to be seen the next couple episodes. All right, predictions time. Do you guys have any predictions you want to throw out there other than Sharon Carter, the power broker?
I'm riding high on that one. I don't need to be, you know, have more right stuff said.
Zemo ought to create the Thunderbolts?
Maybe. You heard it here first, folks.
That would be interesting. You know, they did make a point of, you know, reinstating his intentions with Bucky. So he's, like you said, he's not above using super soldiers, even though
means to an end.
So yeah, that would be cool.
Any predictions, Kendall, for where you see the story going from here?
Yeah, I mean, nothing. Yeah, no real predictions. I do like that Sharon Carter theory. I hadn't thought of it at all, but it makes a lot of sense.
One host didn't seem to think so last week.
Well, I mean, I said it could have been many people. I did tell you I thought it was someone we've met before. I think that's what it'll lead up to. But Kendall, coming at it from the comic book perspective, I also was like, well, if they make it Sharon Carter, it'll make things kind of weird. But it's a possibility. I mean, they haven't been opposed to changing comic book characters for the MCU. As we've seen. So
yeah, which I like. Mm-hmm. I want to be surprised by these stories. I've never been, one. I want to see a direct adaptation of anything. That nothing to me seems more boring than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One internet theory I've seen that I just want to throw out there to see if it sticks to the wall. The power broker is none other than Justin Hammer from Iron Man 2. That's one thing that I saw thrown out there. I don't know if that's going to be reality because it was recently announced that he's coming back for the Armor Wars show that is going to be on Disney Plus.
Interesting.
Yeah, featuring Rhodey. James Rhodes is going to be coming back to kind of clean up the mess that's left after Tony Stark has now passed away. So they're doing.
I've loved Don Cheadle since he was in the Golden Palace. That ill-fated spinoff of the Golden Girls. Let me tell you.
We couldn't get out of the podcast without a Golden Palace reference.
That's your next podcast. I'll do
that. Before we go, does anybody have anything else to say about this episode or anything else?
Two things. I was really, proud of my Chicago 1968 theory, and you didn't really give me the credit that I thought I deserved for that one. So
I am very impressed by you bringing the historical context into the show.
I think by the end of this series, it will be Falcon, Winter Soldier, and Carly working together.
Okay.
Taking down John Walker. I think that's where we're going in the next 2 episodes.
Okay.
And if they only have to team up as a means to an end.
Okay. Do you think that we see a Captain America by the end of this show? Will there be a new Captain America, or has the symbol now been tainted?
I think it's tainted, and I think it'll be up to Sam to rehabilitate that image.
Yeah, I really want to see Sam Wilson Captain America.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can we just to go back, because my original theory that he never gave the shield, I thought in the fight with the soldiers from Wakanda, that they were going to realize that the shield was not the actual shield made of the steel, and I was so excited to be right for that. But
yes, that was a crazy theory that we had last week, that maybe John Walker didn't have the real vibranium shield, but unfortunately that was not to be. I do want to say this, just a little bit more context from the comic book perspective. Sam Wilson Captain America, when that series came out, a lot of people were very excited, but it was at a time when Marvel was changing a lot of its legacy heroes over, and I think a lot of longtime comic book readers gave that series a hard time and didn't really give it a fair shake. It sort of it got caught up in some events, and then it ended very quickly. But there was always a sentiment among a lot of the comic book community that Sam Wilson is not Captain America, shouldn't have been Captain America. They want Steve Rogers back, bring back the original. And I think that the MCU is structuring this in a very good way. Whereas if they had Sam take up the shield and become Captain America from the get-go, I think we would have seen that same group of people saying the same thing of Sam Wilson is not really Captain America, doesn't deserve to be Captain America. He's this side character. I don't want to see that. But the MCU instead shows us the absolute worst person that could be Captain America doing these terrible things, so that by the time Sam does pick up the shield, if he picks up the shield and becomes Captain America, we'll see that sort of as a relief and understand why he is suited to be that role. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because I'd been thinking about that for a while, and why the series is sort of structured the way that it is. And that just kind of made a lot of sense to me, just living through the reaction to Sam Wilson, Captain America.
Yeah. The comics, I mean, the big two superhero comics, they're they're kind of fated to forever be, like Steve Rogers, he'll never get a break, because since the 40s he's been chucking the shield around. And the MCU, just like the nature of like film and actors, I look forward to kind of a rotating passing of the torch for not only like specific, characters being legacy characters, but like, it's going to be cool that like, we're stepping away from Iron Man, and like, Shang-Chi might be the next like breakout star of the MCU. And like, I look forward to that.
Yeah, it's one of the things I hope that they don't use the multiverse, because they're moving towards the multiverse. It's in the title of the next Doctor Strange movie. They don't use that as sort of an easy reset point, to try to bring back, well, this is the Captain America from this universe, and this is the Tony Stark from this universe, and then bring it all back again. I don't think they're going to go that way, because they are introducing a lot of these sort of the second generation, the Young Avengers. It seems like they're going to give a few other heroes time to shine. But I think they may be keeping that in their back pocket to say, oh, well, we've got a multiverse now. So if we want a new Captain America and a new actor, we'll just, this is Earth 365's Captain America. It's just how they're going to handle that. So we'll see. But we've run on for a little longer than normal. So I do want to.
We get overtime.
Overtime. Well, I will say, if you guys have anything to plug, now's the time. There's usually what is the minty conversation of this week?
Yeah, I just want to say, since I've started plugging it on this show, viewership has gone down on the Minty show. So I'm gonna lay off on plugging anything this week.
Oh, okay, all right. Kendall, what are you guys working on?
Yeah, check out me and my wife's comic. You can find us at Star Savior Bunny on Instagram. That's all.
All right.
Go there and check it out.
And for Level Up, we're getting closer to an opening date for the Summers Point location. It's looking really great. Hoping that when we have the conclusion of this series, maybe we'll have a little bit more to announce. But yeah, it's looking really good. So if you're in the South Jersey area, be sure to stay tuned to check out the Level Up Site B. Coming soon.
We should do a podcast at the grand opening.
Socially distanced and
yes.
Everything, but that maybe that will be a thing. Who we'll see.
I'll come down for that.
Wow. Okay. All right. We will see. So for The World is Watching, episode 4, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we are through. This is now the beginning of Act 3. 2 episodes left. We'll see what happens. I thank you very much, Kendall and Mike, for joining me. I appreciate you guys and your time, as always. I am Harry, and we will catch you next week. To be continued.